The new Inferno is officially out. Valve has a very nice comparison page with plenty of before and after shots. Check it out in the video's description. I won't bother covering these again in the video. Instead, let's move on to some stuff that you might not have known. Taking a look at it in the editor, much like other recent maps like Nuke and Train, it relies heavily on models to detail the scenery. This shows a shift away from funk details, which they used to use a lot more, where pretty stuff was manually pieced together using shapes and textures rather than a proper modelling program. Using models feels like a more modern approach to map design, makes everything look prettier, and is clearly preparation for a Source 2 facelift! Or not. But it does at least give mappers plenty of high quality props that they can just drag and drop into their own maps. So we should see improved looking community maps coming out very soon as well. Another feature I like is the blended textures. It's been around in Source forever to smoothly merge, say, grass into dirt. But the stonework on Inferno uses a smarter kind of blending to make the paint look worn and faded with time. It helps break up repetition in the textures and is great fun to play about with in the editor. This isn't the first time this smarter blending style has been used. I think even Mirage has it in some spots. Plus it's similar to how snow was painted onto objects in Skyrim, and an old Crysis 2 tech demo showcases it on brickwork similar to Inferno's. But it's nice to see pretty pixel shaders such as these being used to bring Source up to date at perhaps just 5 years behind the times. But in some ways Inferno is more similar to the older maps again. It's got a very tight, enclosed skybox. This helps with optimisation, but does mean that you can't chuck grenades high into the air. As long as you keep them close to roof height, you'll be able to chuck them great distances, though there's a skybox stopping you from throwing them between CT spawn and banana and T-side of mid kind of area. And here are the spawn points. As with most other CSGO maps, they're placed in groups of 5, each resembling a C shape. For terrorists, there are definitely good and bad spawns, with this one here being the best to reach mid, and this one for alt mid. Over on CT's side, it's a bit more complicated. This one is best for reaching library, this one for mid, and it's a battle between these two to reach B first. My money's on this guy because although he might be a little further away, he does have a clear path to the site. Time for a very quick little chokepoint analysis. Does T-Spawn's new entrance have a point? Yes it does. You can see from here that it's about a second faster for reaching alt mid than the main entrance is. The fastest way of getting a view into apartments is up through alt mid, through the door and around this corner, which will grant you visibility to rushing CTs over a second before the path around the outside does. But the outside path will still let you enter the apartment soonest. As a CT, unsurprisingly, the quickest approach to apartments is the risky push past mid and window. You'll reach the foot of the steps just after terrorists reach the inside corner and just before they reach the corner outside. And although T's alt mid exit is the fastest way of reaching the apartments, exiting through the main terrorist spawn entrance and rushing up the stairs to bridge will grant you over a second to line up a sniper shot before rushing CTs past this window. There isn't time to reach the other balcony without letting the fastest of the CTs slip past unseen. And unshot. This is how both teams meet in middle. And finally, the approach to B. Maybe you could shave time off these runs. That's the beauty of a new and mysterious map. I'm going to be very disappointed if pre-firing and pre-nading that sticky out bit of wall doesn't become a thing. Frames a second. The old Inferno map would have given you plentiful, nay, copious, bountiful quantities of FPS, what with its roots back in Source, so it's no surprise that the new one runs slower. I compared 10 locations at 4K, maximum settings, and with 8x anti-aliasing. A real worst case scenario. But why, you might ask? Because I have a Geforce 1080. This is by no means a definitive conclusion, or one that you might experience, but I found that frame rates dropped by about 30%. So for every 10 frames you were getting before, you'll now get about 7. Or 3 if you did the math wrong. I then went and got frame rates from other maps as well. These are all an average of 4 different locations, one in either bombsite, and 2 other areas that I felt represented the map in general. Once again, not a definitive test by any means, but the result was still a surprise. New Inferno is a lot slower than you might expect. It's slower than Train. It's practically on par with the locations I tested from the new Nuke. I'm going to give the new Inferno the benefit of the doubt here though, since I found it to be more consistent. Probably thanks to its more closed design, which makes every location behave more like an indoor area. My frame rate in Nuke in comparison varies a lot more depending on where you are and even which angle you're facing. I wouldn't worry about it, and if you are, then your setup probably struggles in most modern games. And Nuke. And the other maps a bit as well. And now for the bit you've all been waiting for. How did bots perform on this map? To aid me in this most important task was Bez the Bot Whisperer.
Come on, Alfred. Good boy.
He took me on a tour, showing me all of the problems he could find with the nav mesh. He says that it's mostly automatically generated. Clearly Valve is still horribly out of touch with what's important in their games. They still don't understand the true importance of bots. When will they learn? They've lost a few of their tricks that they had on the older Inferno. They're no longer able to jump over this railing. And since they're reduced to a walking pace whenever they approach a planted bomb site, having to walk around takes a substantial amount of time. Valve have at least bothered to remove the jump command from a few areas to stop them from wildly hopping about, but the whole thing seems to be based on an older version of the map. He found some empty spots, clearly where there used to be things that were removed, like a bench or something here, and in other areas there were navs where clearly there shouldn't have been. These coffins here were a late addition to the map, as was this wall near T-spawn. None of these areas caused too much of a problem though. He says that with the co-op missions, Valve have really improved the bots, mostly by teaching them when to ignore Valve's commands when they don't make any sense. But the nav meshes don't help matters. When camping at Banana, for example, bots will favour this side of the cover over actually being behind it. And since the whole thing is at a strange angle, the nav mesh believes that every bit along either side makes for a great camping place. Which it doesn't. Please fix. He commended bots on realising that the shoddy nav meshes on these hay bales just aren't worth dealing with. Sure, they can jump down okay, but when summoned up again, instead of dealing with them...
Yeah, and now back in the apartments.
Bez predicts that at some point there's going to be a horrendous bot pile-up in library caused by this sticky out bit of wall here, where one bot will bump into it, causing a catastrophic chain reaction between the rest of them, resulting in them all nervously bumping about and waiting for each other to move for a comical amount of time. Like a bunch of old people meeting each other at a roundabout. It's going to be cataclysmic, and yet Valve just doesn't seem to care. So that's a quick look at Inferno. I'm impressed with it so far, though it'll take time to decide on how it performs, gameplay wise. Though I'm very pleased that they've pimped out the boiler, and even more so that they brought back the best music from Source. Thanks, Valve.